Hey guys, this is the Law. Happy WrestleMania weekend, everybody. A little while back, Cewsh and I recorded this podcast talking about and reviewing WrestleMania 9. It was supposed to be the first in a series of WrestleMania podcasts that I did this year, but timing didn't end up working out on that, so this is the only one that I actually did. But, anyway, I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, let me know, and, maybe we'll do more of the Law Reviews podcasts in the future. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the so far untitled Cewsh Reviews WrestleMania podcast series. I'm your host, the man they call the Law, and joining me here for the pilot episode is the father of Cewsh Reviews, the one and only Cewsh. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing awesome, man. I am so freaking excited to be here talking about this show.
You are the only one who would be excited to be here talking about WrestleMania 9. So, as a little background for the audience, when I decided to do these podcasts, Cewsh was the first person I asked. And I gave him the option of choosing any WrestleMania he wanted to watch and review with me. And then he chose WrestleMania 9, and I assumed it was because he wanted to make fun of it. Everybody knows WrestleMania 9 is the worst WrestleMania. But then it turned out WrestleMania 9 is a WrestleMania that he actually likes and enjoys. So let me start by asking you, what the hell's wrong with you? Why do you like WrestleMania 9?
All right. Look, you have to understand that this is like the second wrestling show I ever watched when I was like 8 years old and first discovered that wrestling was a thing. The first one, all I remember about it was that it had Macho Man Randy Savage on it. So this is like the first VHS tape of wrestling I ever see. So obviously it's going to have like a huge fond spot for me for the rest of my life. But even saying that, I will defend this show to my very dying day. This show has, it's like, I kind of described it to you when you asked me originally kind of why the hell I would choose this show. This show is like an 8-year-old got the pencil and then they just ran with it. It's like all the cocaine in the whole world got done over a long Vegas weekend, and they looked at the run sheet afterwards and were just like, fuck it, let's just do that. I can't even describe, like, there is no other wrestling event in history anything like this one. The setting, the people involved, the matches, the bizarre booking decisions, like, this is truly a one-of-a-kind show.
Yeah, I will say, if you like weird wrestling, this is by far the weirdest WrestleMania. And it's funny that you mentioned cocaine, because one of the things that was happening in the company at this point was that because of the FBI, the federal investigation into Vince McMahon's steroid trafficking, they were actually drug testing heavily. So, as a matter of fact, nobody should have been on cocaine at this point. But the results don't seem to bear that out.
It's funny that you mentioned that, too, because when you look at this show, everybody seems a lot smaller than I remember from other older shows.
Yeah, it's
Hogan,
mysterious how
especially.
that happened.
Yeah.
Hogan looks like a balloon that they let the air out of.
Oh, absolutely. Except for Luger, who, if they're drug testing Luger, I will be fucking shocked.
Yeah, I don't think there was drug testing in the WBF, which he was probably actually still an employee of. So that may have been their way around that.
Yeah, everybody else just has like those good like bodybuilder bodies. Like it's the closest to people like the way wrestlers are built now that WWE ever was at that time.
Where they just look like normal people in really good shape.
Yeah, like I mean, Crush is on the show, and he's a really good example. Like he's not like a gigantic muscle built dude; he's just a big dude.
Yeah, he's thick.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let me go to the segment we call How the Hell We Got Here, where I explain the backstory of this WrestleMania. This comes at a time of big change for the WWF. Most of the bedrocks of their big run in the 80s are either gone from the company or on their way out. If you compare who was in the top matches at WrestleMania 8 to this show, most of them are either gone or on their way out. So that's Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Sid, Ric Flair, Roddy Piper, Ultimate Warrior. Those guys are either in significantly reduced roles or they're just gone altogether. So they're, out of desperation beginning to elevate new talent. They haven't started using the term new generation yet, but that is in full swing at this point. As we've mentioned, the other big issue hanging over the company was the federal investigation into steroid use and distribution. that McMahon doesn't get indicted until the end of this year, but they are very much taking evasive action in response to that, and we'll probably cover that more as we go on. The big change into the Guard happened in October 1992 when Bret Hart beat Ric Flair for the WWF title at a house show in Saskatoon, Canada. This was kind of a shotgun title change. They were planning to get the belt to Bret eventually, but they moved the timeline way up because Ultimate Warrior dropped Flair on his head, and he, had equilibrium problems. So they had to get the belt off of him. Bret has been champ since then. He beat Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series, Razor Ramon at the Royal Rumble, and Yokozuna has debuted in the fall and gone on just a path of destruction. He won the Royal Rumble in January, which is the first time the Rumble was for the WrestleMania title shot, and that sets up the big showdown, Bret versus Yoko for the title at Caesar's Palace. The other big storyline is Hulk Hogan returns a couple weeks before the show. I believe he had been gone the entire time, at least on TV, since the previous WrestleMania, WrestleMania 8. He returned to help his buddy Brutus Beefcake fight off Ted DiBiase and IRS, who were the team of Money Incorporated, the reigning World Tag Team Champions. That sets up Hogan and Beefcake versus Money Inc., which is the sub-main event of this show. And those are kind of the two big storyline matches I want to cover. So I think after that, we can pretty much just get right into the show now, can't we?
Yeah, as long as we are able to mention the elephants.
Oh yeah, no, there will be extensive coverage of the opening of this show. First, the opening package is amazing because it's Vince McMahon narrating after he's apparently gargled a glass of gravel. Do you want to take it away from here?
Oh yeah, this is word for word what he says, and I'm going to do my best not to have a coughing fit in the middle of this. Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas, Nevada, site of WrestleMania 9. Here is your host, Gorilla Monsoon.
Yeah, so they kick it to Gorilla. He is down on the floor at Caesar's Palace. First, the setting is absolutely beautiful here. This is the first WrestleMania to be held outdoors, and they for some reason, didn't do another outdoor WrestleMania until WrestleMania 24, I think, at the Citrus Bowl. Beautiful setting in Caesar's Palace, sunny, nice day. Roman theme. If you've never watched this show, it's probably worth watching just for the way it looks on its own. But then we get the introduction of the commentary team, which I find a very interesting group of commentators here. First, on play-by-play, we have Jim Ross making his WWF debut. And then co-commentators for the show, Bobby Heenan and Randy Savage on color. What do you think of these guys as a team? I thought they were pretty awesome, actually.
Actually, yeah, I think they played off each other really well. I know Randy Savage really hated being a commentator, and that's why he was eventually going to go to WCW. But he was so good at it. Like, he sold moment to moment everything that was going on as important and interesting and fabulous. Yeah. Like, he seemed so connected to the show, which was great on the other side of Heenan, who would so often go on his tangents, which were super entertaining, but rarely connected to anything that was going on.
Yeah,
and then, go ahead.
Oh, well, the key to me is they squabble with each other and they fight, but not in a way that takes away from the matches. Like today when the commentators fight, it usually comes at the expense of what's actually happening. They had a good habit of being able to go back and forth a little bit while always going back to the match when things were getting important.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that Heenan's commentary, like his whole deal was basically just that he's a curmudgeonly asshole, but the other announcers like and respect him, even though they constantly like digging at him. Like that's something that I don't know that you could have another character like that ever. That's something that just played for him. The other weird thing is having Jim Ross, this be his first ever show. Can you imagine having an announcer play-by-play for WrestleMania, the first show ever that he ever does in WWE?
Yeah, that is crazy, but that's how good he is and how respected he was. But this, the other thing I find, it's a very different JR than what we'd see. He's not good old JR here. This is very much like 1989 National Wrestling Alliance, like straight commentaries, straight play-by-play commentary, Jim Ross. No cowboy hat. He's actually in a toga, of course, for the theme, but yeah, not nearly as exuberant as we would hear from him in later years.
Yeah, I kind of wonder how much that Vince was in his ear, because he's basically doing the whole show like Vince would have done it. So, and then later on, like they would commentate together. So I think to a large extent early on, like Vince was trying to make Jim Ross be Vince.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then he fired him and brought him back and fired him again and brought him back and fired him again and brought him back and fired him again. And they haven't brought him back yet, but they're probably going to.
I mean, if Vince
in the next year, I would say.
If Vince just wanted Vince, I really don't understand why he just didn't keep doing it.
Well, the heat was coming down on him, so I think he was taking a little bit of a step back at this point.
I guess that makes sense.
All right, so opening match. It's for the Intercontinental Championship. Shawn Michaels, the defending champion, against the undefeated Native American Tatanka. The primary issue here, as far as I can tell, is that Sherry, Shawn's longtime manager, and Shawn have split. She's in Tatanka's corner, and so Shawn, to counter that, has a woman in his corner, Luna Vachon, making her WWF debut, which I find really interesting because I think this is pretty much the only time she actually managed Shawn.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why they didn't keep that up because it's kind of an odd grouping to have the pretty boy with the woman who the commentators spend this entire match disparaging as being, kind of ugly and hideous, which is pretty gross, but kind of par for the course of the time.
Yeah, and the problem is that the commentators didn't really seem to understand what was going on between Sherry and Luna. And honestly, I kind of had some trouble too. Because what it seemed to be is anytime Luna would get near Shawn, Sherry would lose her mind and try to assault Luna. But like, it didn't even really seem like Shawn and Luna were together. They didn't even come out together. Luna came out like a minute and a half later. I was never really sure what the dynamic there was for any of the characters involved.
Yeah, it's not really clear if Luna is supposed to be helping Shawn or if she just doesn't like Sherry and there's a backstory that they're not expounding upon, which maybe there was because I think they both came through the AWA, but it's not really talked about or referenced here.
Right.
And they don't really get that involved in the match. They're kind of just, it's like Luna threatens to do something, Sherry runs her off, and that's pretty much the extent of their involvement during the match.
Yeah, it's almost like there's two entirely separate things going on because like don't seem connected to the guys that they're in the corner of. I don't think Tatanka even ever looks over at Sherry and notices that she's there.
Yeah, because I also don't think Tatanka and Sherry were ever like an on-screen pair either. So this all seems to have just come together specifically for this match. So the one thing I noted from the commentary is that Tatanka beat Shawn in a non-title match on Raw before this, which just shows that booking trope is nothing new. It's something they've been lazily relying on for a long time now.
Pretty much. And I'm pretty sure, like, I'm especially based on the finish, I think this is still smack in the middle of Tatanka's winning streak. Like,
I looked this up. He did not, his undefeated streak lasted until the fall when Ludwig Borga beat him. So
don't remind me of that.
Yeah, really, really good that they couldn't let Tatanka get beat here so that Ludwig Borga could beat him on Superstars.
Exactly. Tatanka was my dude when I first started watching wrestling. Like, of all the people who were on this show, he's the one who I decided to latch on to as my favorite wrestler. Looking at it from 2016, the half-white guy doing the Native American stuff isn't necessarily super cool. But
yeah. I mean, he was over. He looked cool. I think they probably should have just had him win this match, actually, instead of what they ended up doing. But we'll get to that in a second. Basically, the story here is Shawn is quick and sneaky. Tatanka is powerful. Tatanka spends a lot of the match working on Shawn's shoulder, which he had sustained an injury to in a prior match. Shawn misses a charge into the corner and bangs that shoulder on the ring post and ends up getting it worked over for a lot of the match. Shawn turns the tide kind of midway through with a crescent kick. It's not sweet chin music yet. It's not his finisher. I think he was still using some kind of backdrop suplex at this point, although I think
it was the teardrop.
Didn't get to see it in this match. But, really good match here, actually. I thought this was probably the best match of the show. They get a lot of time. They go 18 minutes. They have a ton of near falls, and this is kind of before that kind of match was something that you saw in every match on the card. Tatanka keeps hitting Shawn with stuff, and he just can't keep him down. Shawn keeps getting out. And then they go to the finish, and it's absolutely terrible. I can't quite explain what happened because it didn't really make any sense. But they fight on the outside. Shawn grabs the referee. They go back into the ring. Tatanka hits him with a Samoan drop and covers him for what would be the pin. And then the referee calls for the bell. And I thought it was a disqualification, but Wikipedia says Shawn was counted out.
Yeah, when they said that it was a count out on the show, I was genuinely confused because we've seen that spot a million times. And just like, okay, so we grabbed the ref, going to be a disqualification. Okay, fine. But no, it was a count out, even though they got back in the ring at exactly the same time.
Yeah. And the referee doesn't call it until Tatanka has got Shawn down in a pinning predicament, which is just, cheesy wrestling bullshit.
Yeah, it really was.
But
yeah, you were right,
outside
though.
of the finish, really like the match.
This probably, and I'm saying this as a gigantic Tatanka mark, like I think this is probably Tatanka's best ever match. I don't think there's a lot of competition for that grandiose title.
Not that I've seen anywhere near all. I've probably seen 5 Tatanka matches, but it wouldn't surprise me if this was his best match.
I think as much as we all love and respect Shawn Michaels, I think a lot of people don't remember how good he was at this point before his body's kind of started getting giving out on him and the kind of pill addiction and all of that kind of stuff. Like, he's brilliant. Yeah. Everything he does looks amazing. And he does it on this show at this time where everybody else is kind of looking slow and clunky and crappy. Like, there was one point where Tatanka was just hitting him with punches to the face and he was taking like a full back bump on every one. And it looked amazing. Just random punches to the face, not even good punches. He made every moment of this match entertaining to watch. And nobody else was doing that at that point.
Yeah, awesome work from Shawn here. Good match. And in the aftermath, Luna finally gets her hands on Sherry, beats her up, and then Tatanka chases her off, and that's the end of this one.
I remember, too, when I was a kid, my mom looks vaguely like Sherry Martel, extremely vaguely, minus the goddamn enormous tits that Sherry was sporting at this particular show. But she looks like it had the same hairstyle or something. So I remember watching this as an 8-year-old and being super duper mad at Luna. Oh my God, that's my mom, you fucking There's
2 things I wish that could have happened here. One, Tatanka probably should have just won the title here.
Yeah.
It's WrestleMania, let the good guy win, change the title in the opening match, the belt can come back to Shawn in a month or 2 anyway. Instead, he lost it to Marty Jannetty in May and then won it back a few weeks after that when Diesel debuted to help him. And right. 2, I kind of wish they just had a Sherry Luna match because that probably would have been a really good addition to this week card.
Yeah, I think I remember something, and this might not be right, but I think I remember that Sherry Martel had some health issues right around this time, so maybe they had intended to do something more like that. It certainly doesn't. It doesn't really seem like this was ever meant to be a title match. They certainly didn't treat it like one.
No, but Shawn had been the champ since the fall, so he was already 6-7 months into his reign at this point.
Right.
Anyway, we go backstage where Gene Okerlund interviews the Steiner brothers. This Scott Steiner bears no resemblance to Big Papa Pump.
No, he doesn't.
Physically, he's probably 80% of the way there, but the personality, they're both really kind of awkward, earnest, golly gee whiz All-Americans in their wrestling singlets.
After I saw Big Papa Pump for the first time, I vividly remember going back and watching old Steiner brothers like this and thinking that Rick Steiner was Scott Steiner because he has way more of the build and the haircut. And I couldn't believe that the flippy guy with the long flowing mullet was Big Papa Pump.
Yeah, I will say before this match that if the only Steiners you've ever seen is late 90s WCW and on from there, go back and watch them from the 80s and the early 90s when Scott could still move because they were ridiculous.
Yeah, that they are exactly what every kind of power tag team has ever tried to be since. If you enjoy why am I blanking on their names on SmackDown now?
American Alpha.
Yes, if you like them.
Those are 2 tiny versions of the Steiner brothers.
Yeah, they are desperately attempting to be the Steiner brothers, and they aren't a patch on the original.
Yeah. All right, so second match, it's the Steiner brothers against the Headshrinkers. The Headshrinkers are Samu and Fatu, 2 members of the Samoan wrestling family. Fatu was Rikishi. I don't remember. I looked this up and now I've forgotten what Samu's relation to everybody else is.
He's a cousin.
Yeah, it gets hazy in there.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'll note is that this is the WWF debut of the term slobber knocker, as Jim Ross breaks that term out early in the match. Heenan goes crazy over that and proceeds to spend most of the match mocking JR in the state of Oklahoma.
I will say that one of the funniest Heenan lines of the whole thing was slobber knocker. Is that what they call girls in Oklahoma? And I was like, all right. All right, buddy.
Yeah, so a lot of impressive stuff from the Steiners here. Rick does a flying Steiner line off the top rope that takes out both Headshrinkers. Scott breaks out a tiger bomb on Samu, and then Scott nearly dies in a horrible botch where Fatu goes to drop him across the top rope, but Samu accidentally pulls the rope down. So instead, Scott just goes headfirst over the top rope and right onto the floor.
Yeah, and he no-sells the hell out of it too, which is...
Yeah, he just pops right back up. Somehow this didn't even hurt him. It probably would have broken my neck if I'd done it, but I guess his neck was a little bit thicker than mine.
I mean, this was not really a great match or anything like that. The Headshrinkers didn't work as the tag team. They were just trying to kind of ape Afa and Sika, and it didn't really work. I mean, obviously, Fatu's like half the size that he would be when he became Rikishi. Yeah.
Afa's in their corner, so they very much are just a rip-off version of the Wild Samoans. But they tagged for a long time because they tagged in they were the Samoan SWAT team in WCW too.
Yep.
So yeah,
obviously
them around.
The weak link of the team is kind of Samu. There's a lot of the Samoan brethren who have kind of had jobs just kind of just
Manu,
because
who I believe is Samu's son.
Exactly. Like there's a lot of them. For everyone that winds up being super talented and great, there's one that's just fucking there, and Samu is the definition of that.
Yeah, and to sum up how bad Manu is, he was the black sheep of the legacy, not Ted DiBiase Jr.
All right, let's not hate on the legacy here too much. Not too much.
Yeah. So anyway, Shrinkers get heat on Scott for a really long time. Scott comes back, makes the tag to Rick. Rick cleans house, power slam, Steiner line, suplexes everywhere. He very stupidly double knocks the Shrinkers. We all know that's not going to work.
Nope, not at all.
And then in one of the most amazing spots I've ever seen, the Shrinkers put Rick up on their shoulders for an drop. They come off the top rope with a cross body block. Rick catches... I don't remember if it was Fatu or Samu coming off the top, but he catches whichever one came off the top while he's still on the other's shoulders and power slams him off. I hope this is on YouTube. If it is, go look at it. It's unreal.
This is the most, genuinely, it's top 5 most amazing counters I've ever seen in my entire life. And there's a moment where he just straight catches him and then just kind of flips him back over for the power slam. It is so visually awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Unfortunately, this isn't the finish, but Scott tags in and hits the Frankensteiner, which is pretty great in its own right. And that's the 1, 2, 3. Steiners get the win.
Yeah, and thank goodness. I mean, the tag division at that point really didn't exist. I mean, there were kind of tag teams, but this was after the 80s when we had a billion great tag teams, and then that just kind of falls apart and doesn't really fully recover until the Attitude Era where everybody kind of comes back around. And you can tell here, because if Hulk Hogan's involved in your tag division, that means that there's no real tag teams.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, this might be the last babyface win of the show, so enjoy it while it lasts.
Oh, yeah, that's true. This is not a good show for that.
No, this is basically a WCW show, right down to Hulk Hogan, stealing it in a totally illogical and nonsensical way.
It does kind of feel like a WCW show now that you mention that, actually. Early in the 90s, they had all these shows with these weird pageantry and these kind of weird ideas, and then all the heels would win and you'd be disappointed. It feels like that.
Yeah. So anyway, we go to the back. Mean Gene interviews Doink the Clown. Doink is a villainous heel at this point. This is still Doink when he's awesome before they defanged him and made him a good guy. They recap him beating Crush with a prosthetic arm on Superstars, which is
genius.
I don't know what. This is very different from a main event style of wrestling. So the match is Crush versus Doink. Crush is Bryan Adams from WCW. I don't know if he's better known for that or for being Crush, but depending on which company of you are a fan of, I guess. The match is pretty much Crush beating up Doink, and then the real shenanigans start. So Doink accidentally knocks down the referee. A second Doink shows up and hits Crush with the loaded arm, and Doink pins him. And then they do a thing where they pretend like it's actually a mirror and there's not actually two Crushes, and Heenan is being like, oh, it's a mirror, this is an illusion. I don't really know what this was going for, do you?
Honestly, this is my favorite version of this that I've ever seen. If only because like they went so far out of their way to like make it be something. Because honestly, we've seen like the Bella Twins or Kurt Angle and his weird brother.
They don't do like real twin magic here. It's just another guy who looks like Doink shows up and beats up Crush. They don't switch for the pin or pretend to be each other. And I think I looked this up, but I don't remember who played the other Doink or if anybody knows who it was.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, as far as I know, this never came up again either. It seemed like it would be the start of something with the two Doinks, but I don't really think they did this again after this.
No, I don't think Matt Bourne was actually, Matt Bourne was Doink for much longer after this, actually, because he's kind of got his drug problems and needed to get that sorted out.
Doink, the character, is around, but they switch him out to somebody else, and it was not nearly as good after that, and it wasn't really all that great to begin with. So as good was really not good.
He's killing it as Doink here, though. Like, this is not a good match. It's really not. But as Doink the Clown, like, he is absolutely killing it every moment. Finish.
No, I think Matt Bourne was a really good technical wrestler, and like the evil clown character is something that works. We've seen that in pop culture in many other instances. I understand why they thought that character would work, and it really kind of did for this era of wrestling.
Yeah, and like the finish. At the end, the thing that kind of sold it for me was like the extra Doink kind of goes under the ring, and it's just and then they actually send out Bill Alfonso to be like, hey, whoa, there were two Doinks out here. We need to reverse this decision. And then they go, grabs the other ref. He's like, look, man, there's another Doink under this ring. Let's catch him. And they pull the ring apron up, and there's nobody under there. They even the camera kind of gets under there and shows that there's nobody there. And Bill Alfonso,
where did he actually go?
That is a great question.
Did he have to stay under there for the rest of the? Did he have to stay under there for the rest of the show?
I mean, I think that's what they generally do. Yeah. Like, there's no way in the middle of Caesar's Palace they had one of those lifts that would take you up and down. So yeah, I guess he was just under there the whole time.
Yeah,
and then Bill Alfonso's just like, oh wow, there's nobody under here. Oh well, I guess it was an illusion, and I was fooled. Like, no, Bill Alfonso, you saw the second clown.
Yeah,
don't just be like, oh well, all right, fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this kind of thing works in the world of wrestling because, there's not supposed to be a fourth wall here. But we're, I guess Heenan's just being a heel and treating it like it's an illusion. But I don't understand what we're supposed to be thinking as the audience when we watch this.
That is a good question. I don't know what the kayfabe for this is. Like, Doink actually has the powers of illusion to mimic himself.
Well, we know the Undertaker has powers, so those do exist in this universe.
So what you're saying is that Undertaker versus Doink should have been WrestleMania 10.
Yeah, and maybe the streak never would have happened because Doink might have beaten him.
Oh my God, what could have been?
Yeah. We'll get to the streak never happening in a little bit when we get to Undertaker's match. But next match is Razor Ramon versus Bob Backlund. The crowd is really into Razor here, even though he's supposed to be a heel, and really not into Backlund.
Backlund looks like the goofiest dude that you have ever, even by Bob Backlund standards. Like, he still has the full puffy bangs he had in the 70s. He looks like he's only 30 here, even though he has to still be 50 at this point.
Yeah.
Nobody in the crowd seems to have any interest in who he is.
No. Well, he'd been gone. He basically left wrestling after he lost the title at the beginning of 1984. And
is this before or after the chicken wing feud with Bret Hart?
This is before that. He's just come back to the company. He was in the Rumble this year, and he lasted literally an hour. So that got him. He got a little bit of an ovation for that, but a character not clicking, an example of they would do this a lot in the couple of years after this, like bringing back guys from the 80s who weren't really stars and trying to treat them like stars. They do the same thing with King Kong Bundy after this, and various other guys. It's things weren't clicking, and they were trying to go back to the past and not doing a good job of it. One note is that I always wondered what Bob Backlund did during his 8, 9, 10 years away from wrestling, and my guess was, I bet he was a high school gym coach. And I looked it up, and he was coaching wrestling at a boarding school in New England the entire time he was away.
That is exactly what you would expect, yeah.
There's really nothing to this match. It lasts 3 minutes. Razor, basically, Backlund dominates the match, and then Razor cradles him and pins him. And nothing. Probably worst match on the show. They really probably should have found something better for Razor to do here.
Yeah, I mean, when you think now of WrestleManias where those matches where they just get like 20 people on the card and it only lasts 5 minutes and you're like, why are they doing that? At least that's to get them a paycheck. This match had no reason to exist.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in Vince's mind, Bob Backlund was world champion for 6 years and Razor's going to beat him, and that's a big rub for Razor, but nobody cares about Bob Backlund in 1993.
Right.
Yeah. So next up, we go to the back. Mean Gene interviews Money Incorporated. They allude to an incident at the gym with Hogan the night before. It's shrouded in mystery, and we'll get into kind of the myth making behind this in a second. But our next match is Money Inc. versus Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake for the World Tag Team Championship.
Oh my God, this match is so fucking bad.
Yeah, a lot of weird stuff happens here. So the only reason people remember this match is because Hogan has a massive black eye. Like, his right eye is swollen shut.
Oh, yeah.
And the myth, rumor, and innuendo is that him and Savage had gotten into it because Savage and Liz were breaking up, and Liz had allegedly been staying with Hogan while her and Savage were fighting, and Savage found out, and Savage beat him up. Never been, no real evidence to support that other than it kind of seems like something that would happen. Hogan says he was in a jet ski accident. I don't really know much about it beyond that.
Well, most jet ski accidents affect just your right eye, so...
Yeah. True. But the kayfabe cover for it is that DiBiase must have paid somebody to attack him, and he got beat up coming out of the parking lot in the gym. Presumably, it was the same guys who beat up Shawn Michaels at the bar in Syracuse when he had to drop the title to Dean Douglas.
Well, see, this is kind of like, I thought when I just watched the show yesterday, I kind of thought like they kind of definitively established that it was Yokozuna who jumped Hulk Hogan. Because like that was kind of the thing when I thought that they established that. That's at least the impression that I got.
Is this why Hogan was so mad when he challenged? I'm jumping ahead in the timeline here.
Right, but I think that's why Fuji called him out. And I think that was part of what Fuji was trying to get across, is that, like, my guy's the one who jumped you, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think that this is all of the stuff that they had to weave together. Hulk Hogan wanted to be champion again. He wanted it off of Bret Hart. He got a shiner from Randy Savage, most likely, probably not a jet ski accident. And he's in this other match. And they have to weave all of this together into this convoluted narrative where they just, Money Inc. mysteriously says that somebody jumped Hogan. Hogan doesn't seem to clearly know who it was. And then I feel like they reveal at the end that it was Yokozuna, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Anyway, like, Hogan and Beefcake kick the crap out of them for the early part of the match. DiBiase and IRS decide we're out of here. They go to take a walk, and the Finkel gets on the PA and says that the referee has ruled that if Money Inc. get counted out, they lose the titles. I don't understand how the referee is supposed to have the authority to decide that, but it's always a nice spot to pop the crowd, and the crowd does go wild. They get back into the ring just in time. Money Inc. take over. DiBiase chokes Hogan with the tag rope. He gets him in the $1 Million Dream. Arm drops twice, but Hogan fires up and escapes. Yeah, I mean, the referee gets distracted by IRS. Beefcake sneaks in and locks DiBiase in a sleeper hold, so that backfires. We do a long stretch where both Hogan and DiBiase are down on the mat, and we almost get a double count out. But Beefcake tags in. He gets cut off. He gets beat on. They rip off the protective mask he had been wearing because in real life he had gotten his face smashed up in an accident and had to wear this mask to protect him after his surgery. The match goes on for a while longer, and then we get to some silly nonsense for the finish. The ref gets bumped. Hogan and DiBiase tag in. Hogan takes Beefcake's protective mask and knocks out both guys with it. Jimmy Hart then crawls into the ring, takes off his jacket and reverses it to show the inside is referee stripes. I forgot to mention that Jimmy Hart was managing Hogan and Beefcake here. That's another very WCW-ish thing, that Jimmy Hart is Hogan's manager, despite Jimmy Hart clearly being a heel. Jimmy Hart counts the 3, and Hogan and DiBiase celebrate with the tag belts like they've just won them. And then a second referee runs in to say, no, this is actually a disqualification.
Like, in that era, I'm genuinely kind of surprised that they didn't just treat like that pin done by Jimmy Hart as real. Because, like, honestly, I doubt anybody even would have really questioned it at that point in time. It's just like, yeah, fine, whatever, Hogan wins. It is what it is.
I'm surprised they didn't just do a real, like a proper dusty finish here. Since the referee did get knocked down, they could have had Hogan get the pin, a second referee come in, everybody boo. I don't think it would have been any, worse than what they did instead.
Have we mentioned yet that Brutus Beefcake spends this whole match wearing a jockstrap on his head, and then anytime anyone tries to punch him, it ricochets off the jockstrap?
I did mention that Hogan got it got ripped off his face, and Hogan used it as a weapon.
Yeah, I mean,
Brutus Beefcake's entire career is just like, it's so clear that there's no way he'd be anywhere near Hulk Hogan at this point if they weren't actually good friends who worked out together. And this is the next 7 years of his career he spends riding Hogan's coattails.
Yeah, and I remember being confused as a kid watching these shows because they don't do anything to establish on TV that Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake are friends. It's literally just like a backstage thing, and then there are matches where they're together, but they're never in the same segment. Like, Beefcake never gets promo time where he talks about how good friends he and Hulk Hogan are.
He did a long promo on the second or third episode of Raw that completely bombed, but where he finally got a pop when he mentioned that while he was in the hospital, his good friend Hulk Hogan called him.
Nice.
And that's the extent of this being established.
Yeah, it's just one of those weird things where something backstage is put on TV with such little explanation, and the fans are just like, all right, well, I guess.
There was a lot of let's take a guy who's an upper mid-card babyface and team him with Hogan. Him and Beefcake had previously teamed up against Savage and Zeus at SummerSlam, but yeah, I mean, this is a weird use of Hogan. Clearly this pay-per-view should be Hogan putting over Brett, since Brett's the guy they're going with, or Hogan putting over anybody, really, whoever they thought was going to be the next top guy, and instead he's in this crappy mid-card tag match that ends up going nowhere.
Well, he probably only agreed to it because we know what's coming later. But again, we'll get to that.
All right, we go backstage. Mean Gene interviews Mr. Perfect. He keeps trying to say the narcissist Lex Luger, and he just can't do it.
Narcissist.
Yeah. Trips over it about 5 times. So the match is Lex Luger versus Mr. Perfect. Luger debuted at the Royal Rumble. He had spent a year as a commentator for the World Bodybuilding Federation, which has gone belly up by now. I mean, he's got kind of the gimmick you'd expect for Lex Luger. He's obsessed with his appearance and his body. He's got 4 very scantily clad showgirls accompanying him to the ring. Like, these girls are wearing less clothes than the Godfather's hose would.
Basically, yeah.
It's kind of remarkable that this is on TV in this
era. Like weird 90s thongs on that didn't like go in. So they just kind of like covering like the strip on the back, but it was very odd.
Yeah, Perfect after after some time away from the ring that he spent managing Ric Flair and doing a little commentary, is back as a wrestler. He returned to the ring at Survivor Series as Randy Savage's partner, beat Ric Flair in a retirement match on Raw in January, and now he's here wrestling now he's here wrestling Luger, and I don't really know what the issue was between them.
I don't even think that there really was one. I think like there's nothing on Lex Luger's end. I think Perfect just kind of challenged him to a match. Yeah. It certainly seems that way. Like there's no like real heat between them in the match, but it's mostly this is clearly a showcase match for Luger.
Yeah, which is pretty standard booking. It's it's very similar to the match between Backlund and Razor. And it's just odd that you have another case where the heel has to go over at WrestleMania because the heel, again, is the new guy that they're trying to get over. But, Luger works over Perfect's back, which is the injury that kept him out of the ring. Perfect makes a comeback. They struggle over a backslide. Luger, gets the better of the backslide, and they count the pin even though Perfect's feet are in the ropes.
Yeah.
Not much to this match.
I kind of just want to address this. Like, there's at the time everybody pretty much hated Lex Luger. He was resented because he was sort of a relic of the 80s era. He would have been like perfect for that like 1986 like feud him with Hulk Hogan kind of time. The problem is Lex Luger actually looks like as good as he's billing himself to, which was always the problem with like the masterpiece gimmick and other times that they've tried this, is like they never actually were that visually impressive. Lex Luger's fucking crazy built here.
This is probably the best shape he was in his entire career.
He looks
when he was always the guy who was built. Yeah. Like he kind of looks like he should be the world champion at this point.
Exactly. Like you can't blame them for pushing him. Obviously, he's kind of terrible in the ring, but when he had been in WCW and NWA before, he was much, much better than this. So I don't know if like kind of all the steroids he took for the world bodybuilding thing kind of set him back and limited his mobility.
It's a really different style.
Right.
Big difference in styles between WCW and WWF at this point. And Flair had a lot of issues transitioning from one company to the other because there's just a very particular WWF match that everybody worked at this point. And I think it took Luger a while. I don't know if he ever figured it out, but I understand it could take him a while to get that down.
Right. But I mean, that if there's a multiverse, then there is a universe where Lex Luger figures it out, and he's world champion throughout that whole Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Diesel time.
Well, that's the universe they tried to go with, and they put him on the Lex Express, and it didn't work.
But yeah, like you can't blame them for trying, because when you look at him here, you're like, that guy looks like money.
I think the coolest thing, though, was the segment they do after the match here, where Luger blindsides Perfect and hits him with his, iron-plated forearm. After a while, Perfect comes to and runs back up the ramp to chase after Luger, and like they go back through the curtain, which was something that I feel like they pretty much never did at this point. And he Perfect finds Luger just like kind of chatting with Shawn Michaels. And then Michaels jumps Perfect and beats the shit out of him with a trash can.
Yeah, it was a really great way to get Perfect onto a better storyline for him with Michaels. And like you said, like they never went backstage like that, and they damn sure never just showed like two random heels just kind of chatting it up. Like that's a fascinating new thing that they kind of just started right here.
Yeah, it's not something you'd see much of, until they really went into the Attitude Era. So it's just a time where they're trying a lot of different things, and they ended up picking a lot of the wrong things to do.
Right.
So the next match is The Undertaker against Giant Gonzales. I don't know what there is to say about Giant Gonzales. He was really, really tall.
That is true.
He made The Undertaker look like a small child.
Yeah, he did. Like I remember, and I want to say again, I saw this with 8-year-old's eyes, which is probably like the exact eyes that the show was specifically meant for. And like I know that this show is disparaged upwards and downwards, and it absolutely deserves it for the most part. But as a kid, I was terrified of Giant Gonzales. Like, I know now that like the muscle suit looks ridiculous, but like he is so gigantic and he towers so much over the Undertaker, who to this point is billed as like the biggest guy alive, that like it is actually scary.
Yeah, they had a decent idea here because big, gigantic, freakish people, do get over in wrestling. And wrestling's supposed to be, kind of a freak show. If he had had some normal ring attire, I think he would have been okay.
Yeah, that's the muscle suit was
Sasquatch suit.
The belief then was so strong.
Shoes.
Yeah, the belief then was so strongly that you had to be like built that like even if he had just had like, I know what this man looks like when he's not wearing the muscle suit. He's not super built, but he's so tall it doesn't really matter. They should have just let him be him.
They basically redid this exact same feud, 12 years later with the great Khali. And amazingly, like Khali was actually worlds better as a wrestler than Giant Gonzales was. But, there's still something to that works. Like just bringing in the giant freak and having him fight the Undertaker is something that, worked a lot of times over the course of his career.
Yeah, unfortunately, the finish to this match killed anything they could have had in Giant Gonzales, like dead forever.
Yeah, I think people have heard about this, but basically they have a shitty match, and then Giant Gonzales gets out a rag and some chloroform, which Savage cannot pronounce to save his life.
No, he cannot.
It's the chloroform.
The chloroform.
Yeah. He smothers Taker with it and gets disqualified. And this is why The Undertaker had a winning streak, because they decided to do a DQ here instead of just having Gonzales beat him to set up a rematch.
But see, here's the baffling thing, right? Like, Undertaker, we never thought of him as the kind of guy who would like needs to be protected at all costs, like won't like sell for anybody. That's not him. I mean, here he was this is like 1 in a million of the monster matches that he had to make some big dude look good. And like he tries his best here, but it doesn't really work. But like to use the chloroform, Giant Gonzales could have just like beaten him to death until they disqualified him, and that would have given you somebody. Yeah, that gives you somewhere to go. To bring chloroform in, like he's like, that's like something that Harvey Whippleman himself would have done. To have Guy Gonzales do it after beating the Undertaker up the whole match, it was just weird.
Yeah, I'd be really curious, like what they were going for with that. Taker gets stretchered out here, which is something that had never happened to him to this point. The entire crowd starts chanting for Hogan, which wasn't the craziest idea. They were off by They were off by one match. But then Taker's bell toll, he comes back to life, and he clotheslines Giant Gonzales down.
Yeah. I mean, that's
the end of that segment.
It wasn't very common back then for crowds to turn on a match. Like, it really wasn't. Like, there were a lot of stinkers back then, and most crowds just kind of were there to see the stars, and that was fine. There weren't smart crowds really back then. There just weren't. This is the first match I can remember from that era where like the crowd just turns on a match. Like,
it deserved it though.
Yeah, they were silent for the entire 7-minute runtime, and then they started chanting Hogan at the end. It was just, if I were Taker, I would have just been bummed out.
I can't remember. Did they keep going with this to SummerSlam?
I think they did like one more match. I think they got one more match out of it.
Yeah, they didn't fight at King of the Ring, but I think they may have. Let me look it up. Yeah, they did this again at SummerSlam, a Rest in Peace match, which I think was just like a no disqualification match.
Yeah, and then they turned Giant Gonzales' face at the end.
Oh, doesn't he? He turns on Whippleman, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
And I don't think his run lasted much after that.
Yeah, I think he only had like 4 matches total his whole career.
Which is kind of surprising because he seems like the kind of guy they would have just kept feeding jobbers to, but he may not have been able to pull off squash matches.
No, he literally couldn't do moves. Like there's just nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Good Lord. Okay, so getting down to main event time, but first, Mean Gene interviews Hulk Hogan for some reason. He says he just came from Bret Hart's locker room. Oh, suddenly Bret and Hogan are friends.
Yeah,
Weird how that happens.
not 1 second ever in history have those two ever been shown on screen together, but now they're friends.
Yeah, now they're best buds. Hulk lays down a challenge. He wants to take on whoever wins the belt tonight. And I'm quoting him, whether it's Bret or the Jap brother.
Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Boy, yeah.
Yeah. Unbelievable that 20 years after this he would have big scandal where he said a bunch of racist stuff.
But I mean, it wasn't just him. Like, they keep panning to signs in the crowd that are just like, "Go on, Bret, beat that dirty Jap." Yeah, it's just like
there is some very misplaced nationalism in this match.
Yes, like that was basically the whole premise of the Yokozuna thing. Was like, it's Pearl Harbor 2, y'all. Come and stop it.
And they line up a Canadian for him to fight in the main event of WrestleMania. I mean, I guess Bret's mom is American, so he has dual citizenship, but no, Bret Hart's a Canadian.
This match is fascinating. I did not remember the details of this match, and when I went back and watched it, I could not believe it. Like, it is so different from how I remember it and from how people talk about it. Like, it's a very strange deal.
I thought Bret did a really good job here.
Agreed.
Given that Yoko I won't say won't sell like he's selfish, but like he's not going to sell anything.
Right.
He's not going to bump. Yoko can't leave his feet until the end of the match here. So Bret makes that work. Basically wrestles himself for 8 minutes.
What I found interesting is Bret has so much offense in this match that basically Yoko has almost none. Like, it is almost all Yoko standing in the ring while Bret does offense to him to get him off his feet. And then he leaves his feet and Bret just like drops elbows on him for 10 minutes.
Yeah. This is a very odd match. Lots of, Yoko missing things and Bret taking advantage. Almost a little bit like Shane McMahon and The Undertaker from WrestleMania this year, except Bret doesn't jump off the Hell in a Cell at the end. Instead, he hits Yoko with a couple bulldogs.
Mm-hmm.
Bret, towards the end, Yoko's got him in like a bear hug. Bret grabs the turnbuckle and accidentally tears it off.
Which is the best way to do that spot that I've ever seen. Like, it felt real.
Yeah. Bret, because he's a dirty cheater, rams Yoko's head into the buckle and then locks him in the sharpshooter. And then he gets salt thrown in his eyes by Fuji, and Yoko pins him. No offensive maneuver.
Let me just say this. If Yoko drops the bonsai drop on him and just beats him clean right there, this is a great WrestleMania main event. Like, it's not a great match, but like,
it would put Yoko over as a monster.
Exactly, and that's a great finish.
Who the hell's going to beat this guy?
Yeah, the visual of Fuji throwing the salt in Bret's eyes while he's in the sharpshooter is fabulous. Like, that is a great image.
Yeah. And it would have been shocking to have the bad guy win at the end of WrestleMania. It had never been done before.
Yeah, and they built the bonsai drop as such a killer. It would make sense, too, while Bret had to be stretchered out, basically. Like, he couldn't be part of anything. And that's when what happens next happens. It would make more sense why Bret couldn't be involved.
Yeah. So what happens next? Hulk Hogan comes out to check on his good buddy Bret.
And did you notice that he teabagged Bret a couple of times while he was doing it? Like, he just kept crouching his crotch right over Bret's face.
He's so concerned for his best friend. Fuji gets on the microphone and says stuff. You can't understand any of it.
No, it was a horrible idea to make him get that idea across because it doesn't come across.
Fuji speaks English. He's done promos before, but in front of a live crowd, and I think the mic was kind of sketchy. You can't understand any. You hear him say Hogan a few times.
Right.
That's the extent of it. He says something, and then Bret tells Hogan to go fight him.
Which I do think is an important part that does get lost when people talk about this. Like, it's very clear visually that Brett's like, yeah, go do that shit. Go beat him up.
You hear Brett, Brett's encouraging him. You hear him be like, yeah, go fight him. Like,
right.
Okay.
At least in kayfabe sense, Hulk's not being a jerk here. He's told to go do it.
Yeah. Hogan gets into the ring. Somehow we have a title match here. Now, first, how shitty of a manager is Fuji that he just set his man up with a media title defense against Hulk Hogan
after he's been getting beat the hell up for 9 minutes,
having a match for 10 minutes,
dude. Yeah.
And second, who made this? Like, how is there a match here? They don't have to sign contracts, or there aren't going to be any rule. Like, we're just going to have a match. Like, this is like the Money in the Bank before the Money in the Bank.
I just want to imagine this in kayfabe terms. So, like, I don't know who was like supposed to be in charge at this point.
I think it was still Jack Tunney. I think he was still alive.
Just imagine Jack Tunney sitting back in the gorilla position, looking at the TV like, wait a minute, this is not what I booked for WrestleMania. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, you imagine that like Conor McGregor wins a big fight and he starts talking shit and somebody just like jumps in the octagon. It's like, okay, they're gonna have a fight now for free, unpromoted.
For the belt. Yeah.
All right, we're doing it. So the match lasts 22 seconds. Fuji tries to salt Hogan. Hogan ducks. Yoko gets the salt. Clothesline on Yoko. Leg drop. 1, 2, 3. Hulk is the champion.
I mean, this was Mr. Fuji's big idea to beat Hulk Hogan, right? And he knows that it's Hulk Hogan. His big idea was, hey, Yoko, grab his arms. I'm going to take 5 minutes to get my salt, and I'm going to throw it at him. Even if he hadn't moved, he would have also hit Yoko in the face with the salt. Yeah,
no surprise that after WrestleMania, Yokozuna decided he needed another manager and brought in Jim Cornette, because Corny would not have let any of this happen.
Oh, my God.
I do wish they had Cornette here so he could have accidentally hit Yoko with his loaded tennis racket, and that could have knocked him out.
Now, this is another time where I kind of want to come at it from the perspective of me as a kid, because honestly, I loved the finish to this show as a kid. Like, I loved Bret Hart and I loved Hulk Hogan and I hated Yokozuna, and I was like, Bret Hart beat him up, was awesome. Mr. Fuji cheated. It's not fair. Oh my God, Hulk Hogan's going to make it right. And he did. And it's awesome. Like, yeah. Obviously,
if this were just a comic book and Hulk Hogan is Superman and he flies in to save Batman from the big monster, fine. But, this is professional wrestling where there's supposed to be rules and logic and structure to things.
And of course, this match means much more than just the match, because this is supposed to be Bret Hart and Yokozuna taking over. And honestly, I don't think Bret Hart comes off looking weak from this. They do a lot to protect him here. They make it clear that he can't see. Hulk Hogan checks with him. Like, it's just like, is it okay, brother? Like, he isn't overshadowed completely by Hogan. The person who is buried here is Yokozuna.
Yeah.
Yokozuna is buried by this match.
His WWF title reign lasts 2 minutes. And he gets beat by a clothesline and a leg drop.
Right. So basically,
in 20 seconds.
He basically gets beaten by both Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan in the space of 10 minutes. And he never gets another push like this one again. He will eventually win the title, but he'll never have this momentum again. So really, they screw up Bret and Yoko here.
Yeah, they screwed. I mean, either go with Bret or go with Yoko or just go with somebody. They know Hulk is leaving. The logic here was they wanted to put the title on Hogan for the European tour after WrestleMania. And I don't know that tour drew it any better because Hogan was the champion, but I feel like this helped screw up their company for years because they did this.
And if that's going to be the case, and that's totally fine. This is how WWE's actually gotten a lot smarter in the time since then. This would have never happened now. They never would have gotten put into this position by anyone now. If nothing else, they would have just had the pay-per-view before WrestleMania. Hogan beat Yokozuna for the right to face Bret, and they just would have gone with Hogan-Bret. Because, Bret would have done the job. It would have been the easy thing. There would have been money in it. That's just the simpler way. To do it this way is just such a disaster for everyone involved.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just sort of the story of the night where most of the wrestling on this show is fine, The match quality on this show is better than most WrestleManias because there's not a huge number of matches on this show, so they, space them out, give them some time. We get some longer matches, but like the booking is just so baffling in so many of these matches.
What I find funny though is that for as vilified as the Yokozuna Bret Hart Hulk Hogan thing is, I was just kind of poking around in Wikipedia the other day, and I realized that they remade almost this exact finish for Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, and Dean Ambrose. Like, it's almost exactly the same.
Well, the Money in the Bank contract,
right? That does make a big difference. There's not that like approval.
Silly as that concept is, there's an actual structure there. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of the first Money in the Bank cash in, and Hogan just gets it because he's Hulk Hogan and Fuji's an idiot.
Yeah, Hulk Hogan was like having money in the bank all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like how, they let John Cena have a title match whenever he wants, or The Undertaker can have a title match whenever he wants. He just has to show up and ask for it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of wraps up this WrestleMania. Like I said, this is a fascinatingly bizarre show, and it just shows a company that at the time didn't know where it was going. Like, coming out of this, the belt is still on Hulk Hogan, even though his time with the company is running out. No one comes out of this being like, oh, that's the guy. That's who we're going with. I guess they just didn't know yet.
Yeah. And honestly, the reason that I wanted to do this show and the reason why I maintain such affection for it even now, like, I understand all the things that people like WrestleCraft, like, will all over this thing with the giant Gonzales and all that stuff. This show was one of the last times in WWF that it really felt like the 80s were kind of still alive a little bit. Like, all of those characters were still kind of there and were interesting. And there was still hope in this company at this point. It's going to go off such a cliff. And the way that we look at the show is always going to be colored by kind of what happens in the next few years. And the fact that Hogan just kind of bounces without ever giving Bret his win back and all that stuff. But at this point, when this show airs, like, the WWE is still like a great thing with lots of hope and colorful characters, and it's interesting. And this show is so fascinating visually. It's got like elephants, and it has some really great elements.
Well, the other thing I'll say is this show outdrew the previous couple WrestleManias. It did 430,000 buys, which is 70,000 more than WrestleMania 8. And they didn't beat that number until WrestleMania 14. So this is the best drawing WrestleMania. I believe it was the best drawing since 6. It outdrew 7 and 8. And then the next, 5 WrestleManias draw fewer buys than this one does.
Right.
And maybe that's just a credit to Hulk Hogan, but when you compare the star power on this card compared to the last one, it's night and day. Like, the previous WrestleMania had Ric Flair, it had Hulk Hogan in the main event, it had Sid, it had Piper, it had Savage in the title match. Let's also talk about the fact that Randy Savage is an announcer on this show. Like, what are they thinking? They're so hard up for stars at this point. Why isn't Savage, losing to Bret in the main event, or putting over Shawn Michaels, or putting over Lex Luger, or putting over somebody, or just make Savage the champion and run with him, because he still had a lot of gas left in the tank, as he would prove in his run with WCW.
I think that's just part of the grand Randy Savage WWE mystery, right? Is something is taking place at this time that will eventually lead to these two never talking to each other again for as long as Savage lives. I don't know what it is. I don't know.
How old is Stephanie at this point?
I don't.
Not even going to entertain that.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be that. Maybe it was just Savage so resented being taken out of the ring. Maybe he was taken out of the ring because he had health issues that we didn't know about, the WCW wouldn't have cared about.
I think he had a lot of personal issues at this time. Like, his marriage was breaking up or had already dissolved, and
right.
Yeah, I mean,
who knows what kind
there
of
are a lot of problems going on. I'm sure he was coming off steroids, so his body was changing, and he was, having to wear ring gear that covered himself up in the ring. Yeah, no, there's grand mystery here, but they really could have used Savage on this show.
Oh, they absolutely could have. And there were a bunch of people that they could have used. This is sort of the beginning of where they start pissing away all of this like great talent until they basically wind up with nothing left. It's sort of like the TNA, honestly, if I can make a direct comparison, where they have all this talent and they don't know what to do with it. So little by little, it strips away until you're out of talent.
TNA had a bunch of these same guys. Is how old they were at that point. Randy Savage. I mean, Randy Savage. We're not talking about the same era of TNA when Randy Savage showed up, but Hogan, Flair.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. But I mean, like, that's just what, if you mishandle all of your talent while you're on top, eventually you run out of talent. And that's the lesson of mid-90s WWF is you cannot make a good wrestling product if you just don't have that talent.
And they have Scott Hall. They get Kevin Nash soon after this. They have Shawn Michaels. They have Bret Hart. But none of those guys were ever really big, huge drawing cards, I guess it's fair to say.
Right.
I mean, Nash and Hall drew big money as part of the NWO, but on their own, never really did it.
Right.
Bret and Shawn were amazing in the ring, but the company almost went out of business while they were on top.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, wrapping up. What was your match of the night? I think I'd say Shawn Michaels and Tatanka in the opener probably had the best match.
Oh, it's got to be Michaels and Tatanka. Like, I've been yelling at people about Shawn Michaels and Tatanka for years, and I would say it's honestly one of the best opening matches to a WrestleMania. Like, it just really sets the tone. It puts Tatanka over good. Like, it's good. It's just a damn good
and
match.
Definitely for this era when there were not a lot of great matches at WrestleMania, it really stands out.
Right.
Yeah, and for my MVP, I'll give it to Bret Hart because I feel really bad for him based on how all this turned out.
For my MVP, I'm going to give it to Hulk Hogan, honestly, because he's the only thing on this show that the fans are unequivocally into. You can say what you want about them building the show and Hogan and Beefcake having literally the longest match of the night, which should never have happened, and him winning in the main event, but the fans are so into it, and
they did go wild when he won the belt.
Oh my God, yeah.
It worked in the audience because it was such a huge surprise and shock.
Right, and like he carried it off well. Everything that he did on this show was good Hulk Hogan. Like there's good Hulk Hogan and bad Hulk Hogan. He was good Hulk Hogan on this night. It's the last time he was in WWE until the thousands came.
Yeah, and they would really miss him in the years to come. So that is WrestleMania 9. Thanks for joining, everybody.